Hi everyone, my name is Imran Ijaz. You know very well I'm starting the new program on the behalf of the Voice of Ukrainian, and this program will be hosted from the my side. And today is the opening in the our program, and today is the our first guest, the Mr. Michael. He is the member of the Parliament, also deputy in Ministry of Foreign Affairs Ukraine in European Union. So quickly, I'm starting. I asked to Mr. Michael to little bit introduction about the voice of Ukrainian, and my question about the first, how he think the what's need to do more from European Union to Ukraine, and how they will be expect the what is right now reform in Ukraine. Sir, please.
Yes, thank you very much, and welcome to all who listen. And thanks for your initiative, for taking it. It's always good to have a channel in the real sense to Ukraine in these times of Corona, where we cannot travel and cannot directly exchange views. And insofar, I'm grateful for all such opportunities. Well, I mean, on the one hand, I'm not going into the details of this COVID crisis, which has hit us all, and which is a real challenge for all governments, and especially the health sector in all governments in all countries. That is something that covers us all. Well, the specificities with regard to Ukraine are indeed that there has been a reform agenda that needs to be continued. Yes, there is a new president, there is a new parliament, there is a new government, there are new people, there are many motivated people, but there are also those who pretend to be reformers only, and who have always been around, and who have also in the past delayed or derailed genuine reform legislation and tried to avoid it in order to continue their ways of policy or business making. I think we have all argument and all reason to support the real reformers in Ukraine from the side of the European Union. I mean, Ukraine is the third country in the world that gets most support, where we are really engaging, where we're really working hard on all levels, in the Commission, in the External Action Service, all our experts that we have got in the country. I mean, we in the European Parliament, where I am the standing rapporteur in the Foreign Affairs Committee on Ukraine, and also in other bodies in the Parliament, where we reach out to the Verkhovna Rada in order to make them more efficient and parliamentary in a sense. I think the best will for reform doesn't lead to what you want to achieve if you do it important legislation very generally. You must look into the details, and so far we had, although we understand the wish at the beginning of the new government and president to hurry up, this turbo legislation phase has not always been positive, I would say, because especially difficult reform legislation requires discussion and detailed assessment of circumstances and which consequences this or that rule will have once it is implemented. Insofar, we need decent assessment of what is ongoing, and insofar we are a bit concerned in the last months that the reform process as such perhaps verbally goes on, but there are certain old forces who are taking it up again and trying to, with whatever argument, to come up with a slowing down. Be it, it's so difficult, we cannot one-to-one implement it all what we agreed in the free trade agreement and in the association agreement. We have been saying very clearly, to preserve old oligarch habits and thereby not implement the necessary reform legislation. That is not the way we would like to conduct our cooperation. I mean, we have had it with our reform countries in Central Europe when they came from communism and had to start from scratch. They've gone all through that as well. Ukraine could have gone through that 25 years ago had they had the necessary political will and the structures for that. Now we are there, and now there is the will, and it is proclaimed. But there are still those who, when it becomes concrete, are obstructive. And for instance, I recall before the election that Mr. Sitnik of the NABU, of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, Mr. Sitnik was already under pressure from certain forces during the time of the previous government. Now I see him again. And of course, these are the same people, regardless who is in government. And I think that shows these structures must be overcome. Those who don't care who is in government and what is the political will, but who simply pursue their private agenda. I mean, Kolomoisky is one of those who is very well known even abroad, but there are others who have their private agenda. And in so far, we cannot, so to say, base our cooperation on the assumption, well, that we agree on something, but certain structures simply do what they have always done. So we must be precise when it comes to the health reform. The health reform, especially not only in COVID times, but every time, for people, health and the access to health care is so important, it's existential, and that they know that they can go to the doctor and get the treatment and get it in the framework foreseen, and they don't have to pay a bribe to get treated, because the doctor, they know that with this health reform, the doctors get paid what they are doing. The money follows the patient. That is the principle. And there are interested structures in the private sector who would like to derail this second phase of this reform, and we warn against. Be careful what you wish for, I can only say. That is one area. In the decentralization, I mean, we have seen these attempts of setting up this, well, in Russia we would call it the power vertical, to set up prefects in the oblasts or in the districts even, in order at the side of those who have been elected, the mayors. Yeah, I mean, that is a typical constellation where then there is a conflict of interest, a conflict of competence, and a conflict who is allowed to spend the money. And I think also this decentralization reform was on a good track and should continue to be on a good track. And they should have elections in due course when it is foreseen, and not when the ruling party, whoever it is, feels they might get a better result. I recall also in the previous government that there were these discussions of whether holding or not holding the local elections, or whether these amalgamated communities would have intermediate elections to have a new legitimacy. And there were these reflexes as well, as well. I say clearly, and we say clearly, and I think the real reformers and the people expect that also in the decentralization and this process, they follow the law, and also with regard to the local elections, they are held when they are due to be held. Not artificially advanced, not artificially postponed, but as foreseen, they should be held. And regardless, and if Sluga Naroda did not manage to formulate or to establish a functioning party structure on the local level, well, that's their problem. And that's a problem of many parties in Ukraine, to be present on the local level as well, and to have a real, so to say, not only the party surrounded around their leader on the national level. That is not the reality on the ground. And so far, for the local level, shall they have the elections, and shall they then work with the results and leave the competences and the money flow as it is foreseen in the reform legislation.
That's a great, sir. What you think about the Georgia? Because you know very well in European Union also support the Georgia as well. What do you think about the little bit situation is the between Ukraine and Georgia, or little bit situation is the good Georgia? What do you think about?
Well, in Georgia we have, of course, also followed it closely, and we have had this phase when when it was the discussion about the changing of the constitution and the electoral law, and the question, and that was then mixed with also with the situation that important party members or a one party member or leading member of the opposition party, was put in jail for a second time. And another radio broadcaster is also currently there in jail. The one was released, and there was a hiccup in what was wished to be done. I mean, the ruling party had promised to change the constitution, and they didn't manage some months ago to get the required majority. Then the whole procedure started again, and there the European Union was very actively and constructively involved. And we brokered a deal with the different partners. I hope that this will hold and that this will stand, because I think it's also something where the people expect the political decision makers to deliver, so that they know whom they can vote for, that they know when elections are due, and what electoral system is used, because especially in countries like Ukraine or Georgia, or on another, well, Russia is a special thing because there's only Putin and not so
Yes,
much
exactly.
parties. But the point is that in such countries where the party system is still very new and fragile and not very deeply rooted on the ground, as I said, in Ukraine, sometimes it all focuses on the leader, and then leaders are tempted to have, once they are still elected or supported, to have an electoral system which is relatively unfair and which brings about 2/3 majorities or more. I mean, these 50-50% with the constituencies and the proportional vote, that has its effect, and I would say an undesired effect in many of these reform countries, having on the one hand a big majority, but on another hand a difficult political agenda which doesn't deliver the progress so quickly. And then the people are getting annoyed and unhappy. But if then it's only one party that controls it all, and which doesn't have the necessity to find compromises with the other political forces, that is not something that is very healthy in the long run. And so far, it was good that finally there was a deal that was brokered, and I hope it holds and stands up to the elections there.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Sir, what do you think about the upcoming challenge for the Ukraine and Georgia due to Belarus situation? What do you think about?
Well, there is, of course, the elephant in the room is Russia again, and as always, and in his reflexes, Putin only can think in zero-sum games, only in influence zones, and he thinks Belarus is his, although he has problems with Lukashenko as a person and as a policymaker. Lukashenko, I think, in this point, together with the majority of the people, does not want a total annexation or a union state that doesn't deserve this name, because it would be something where de facto this little Belarus would be swallowed up by big Russia. So. So as a consequence, this congratulation letter from Putin to Lukashenko was already a bit toxic, because he referred to this this union state project also. And now, as Lukashenko lost the elections, I mean,
yes, sir.
Everybody knows it. He knows it. We know it. The people know it. We know all those honest results that were published gave a huge majority for Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. And insofar, he knows perfectly, and he saw it yesterday. I mean, how many people could he assemble around the State House there? Was it 5,000 or a bit more? I have seen the pictures and the movies. It cannot have been that much more. But the people who were everywhere, in Minsk, in Gomel, in Brest, in Grodno, in other cities, they were in the hundreds of thousands altogether, and very decisive and very vigilant and very clear. And today, when he visited a factory and spoke to the workers, they interrupted him and also say, step down, step down. Yeah, it was so obvious, and I hope he has understood it, and opens the door for dialogue, because I mean, in Belarus there is no culture of dialogue, because that was never the case in 26 years, and but there is a dialogue necessary. Because, I mean, violence is not the answer. I'm just getting the news that apparently more people died. Even the health ministry announced that several people died before reaching the hospital. I read, I mean, you can all follow on Nexstar TV. Nexstar Live is the channel where you get all the information in real time. You can see it, what the situation is, and it is by no means settled. Anything can still happen, but what is important is now that the people stay on the streets, that the strikes go on, and we will have, as European Union, a special European Council meeting on Wednesday on Belarus. And we, as a European Parliament, we have just passed, and I posted it on my Facebook page, we have just passed a joint declaration of 5 political groups: the Christian Democrats, EPP, Social Democrats, S&D, Liberals, Renew, the Greens, and the Conservatives, ECR. They are all on board, and we are demanding an end of all violence, the release of all demonstrators and of all political prisoners. We demand new elections, and we demand a special envoy of this European Union for this, to perhaps to be helpful to conduct such a dialogue, a round table or something like that, in order to get the different stakeholders on board. But it's very clear, Lukashenko has lost. He must go. He is not legitimate.
Yes.
He is not legitimate anymore. And we are calling very clearly on Russia to avoid all overt or covered activities, because the last thing the people there want is Russia. I'm very much afraid that Putin doesn't understand it. But that is why the European Council on Wednesday should also not only send clear messages to Minsk, but also to Putin, and say very clearly, be careful what you wish for. And if you wish to come militarily or influence it with your green men or whatever undercover measures, you can expect sanctions in unprecedented size. And that will definitely something that his voters will not like to see. And I think it will also not be popular to march into Belarus, because the people, although the state media are as they are and are having their propaganda already, I think the people know very well what the mood is, and they understand the language, so they can follow it on Nexstar, hopefully, and that this is spread in the social channels, social media in Russia as well, what the reality is. And it's nothing that is instigated from the West. It is nothing when NATO troops are waiting at the border. I mean, crazy things to think of. When our point is, when a partner country doesn't do what we want, we do not send tanks, we accept it. That's the difference between us and Russia.
That's great. Sir, what you think about the recent opposition party in Belarus? His name is Svetlana, I think.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the Svetlana future, and where is right now she, when she will be returned back to the Belarus?
Well, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya was, so to say, only the replacement of her husband. Her husband, Mr. Tikhanovsky, was not allowed to stand with unfair arguments, as was the case with Babarika, as was the case with Gahler, and these were the major ones. And she said, "I'm standing to concentrate the votes on me, in order only after I have won the election to release all prisoners, to make a new start, to have a preparation of free and fair elections, and then have these real and free and fair elections, and then I will step down." I mean, she was a housewife, basically, and not used to making policy statements. And I mean, she had the courage, and that was the big miscalculation of Lukashenko. He thought such a housewife cannot be a danger for me. But it was, so to say, this, what is this acronym? EBL, everybody but Lukashenko. So people would have voted probably for a container of potatoes had that been the competition candidate, because they really are fed up with him. And all those results which have been duly reported, more than 100 polling stations which reported the real results, she had a big majority. In all the foreign embassies and general consulates abroad where there were votes, there was a majority. I think even, I don't know the result from Kiev, but at least also, well, nowhere did an ambassador dare to falsify the results. Why should he? I mean, if you are somewhere at the general consulate in Munich and you have perhaps 200, 300 voters and they know each other, and then the general consul did pronounce 80% for Lukashenko, he could simply not appear in front of the people, because the people know each other and say, hey, but who was it? It was not me. And then you find out that it was falsified. So there we have the correct results. In some other polling stations as well, where sometimes the people stood outside and insisting through their physical presence that the real result was published, and that was then sometimes done. So when you extrapolate that to the entire country, we are pretty sure that Mrs. Tikhanovskaya has won in the first round with an overwhelming majority, and her future is to return, to assume a transitional period, the presidency, and then hold fresh elections for president and parliament.
Yes, exactly. And sir, what you think about the second opposition candidate is Maria?
Maria,
well, second in Belarus. Second.
Yeah, Maria.
She's still in Belarus right now.
Kolesnikova, you mean?
Yes.
Maria Kolesnikova. Well, she has been the head of the campaign of Mr. Babarika Kolesnikova. Okay. I mean, she appeared yesterday. I saw her, what she was saying. It was impressive and encouraging. Well, by the way, she lived in Stuttgart in Germany for 12 years. She's fluent in German, so she can give interviews also through the German-speaking press in Germany and Austria and Switzerland. But, and she is speaking, I think, also on behalf of Mrs. Tikhanovskaya. They are coordinating themselves. I mean, Kolesnikova is on the spot. She dared to stay in the country, contrary to the two other ladies, which I perfectly understand. I don't blame them. I assume Tikhanovskaya, she would be in prison now had she stayed. But what we need to achieve is first the dialogue or the preparedness. And if Lukashenko isn't able to conduct a dialogue, I think even his structures, who would like to have a future after him, would be willing at some point to start a dialogue, and then be grateful that they are left, so to say, not in office, but unharmed, more or less, after a free and fair election. But it is, as I said, it's all very volatile, but we must send clear messages to all stakeholders. We support you. We as European Union are able really to support also financially and with expertise any transition period and thereafter. We are very clear to Lukashenko and his aides to step down, and we must be very clear to Putin not to leave any doubt that there will be a very strong reaction from our side if he overtly or covertly tries to manipulate and turn the will of the people in its opposite.
Yes, sir, you are right. And sir, what you think about in case the Lukashenko will be not stepped down? So what will be reaction from the Europe side? Maybe will be strong sanction against the Russia and Belarus again?
Well, that is, not against Belarus, but against the specific persons. We had the sanctions against him and 170 profiteers of the regime until 2016. And then, as we had the impression it goes a bit in the right direction, we abolished them in the clear expectation that democratization rather than authoritarianism would gain ground. Now, we have, of course, been disappointed in this regard, and we are assembling, we are gathering a list of those people who should be sanctioned. Sanctions means if they have any accounts in the West, they are frozen. If they have any property that is also not accessible, and I think that is for the daily life very painful, especially when it is for the entourage, that there will be a travel ban. So not even to Vilnius or Warsaw, not to speak of Berlin and Paris and Rome. Yeah, I mean, and that harms and that hurts some people. I'm always in favor of including the spouses, mostly the women. Sometimes for the head of the election commission is a lady, so for her husband to include them in order to get the frustration into the families of the bad guys. So that is my idea always with personal sanctions. But we will not sanction the country as such. I mean, the country is anyhow economically weak. There has been no privatization. There has been not very much modernization, apart from some, of course, clever individuals who are in the high tech sector. There they are good as well, but otherwise it's a very Soviet style economy, and it requires a lot of not only creativity but political will and consequence to get this country out of the shadow.
You are absolutely right, sir. What my last question is, what you think about Nord Stream 2? Because you know very well this is a big project, the Russia. So
Well,
what you think? Maybe sanction in Nord Stream 2, or maybe stop this program. What you think about the Nord Stream 2?
Well, first of all, I think if in case, what God forbid, if it were that Russia invaded Belarus and
Okay,
Putin takes a de facto over, I think that will also be an end to this project.
great.
I mean, we cannot leave a channel open where he earns money to finance his wars. That is the one thing. But apart from that, well, I've always been an outspoken critic of that project. I've always said it's a political project. A normal private company would never have built it had they have Nord Stream 1 already, and they have the open pipelines and functioning pipelines through Ukraine. So a normal private company wouldn't have taken this billions of investment. But a state monopolist like Gazprom, of course, they are under the command of Putin. They do it for political reasons, and that is why we should be very careful. And we have in the European Parliament has always had tendentially a very critical majority against this project. And well, I have to say I'm not happy with my own government's handling in this regard. But it is the nice thing as a member of the European Parliament, even when you
Yes,
are member of
exactly.
a ruling party, you can tell the truth and what you think. And we have other people like Elmar Brok, we have Manfred Weber, the group chair of the EPP group, we have the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Bundestag, Mr. Röttgen, and others who are against this project. So it's not something where it's my individual opinion, and many partners in Central Eastern Europe, and of course in Ukraine, and rightly so. I think we have changed the gas directive. We have amended it, and it applies to Nord Stream 2, and the federal grid agency, the federal network grid agency that authorizes things, has clearly said this pipeline can only be conducted applying the reformed gas directive, which requires especially the so-called unbundling between the owner of the gas and the owner of the pipeline. And I would like to see how attractive that is for Russia, for Gazprom, to seek another owner thereof. And so, I mean, that is in a way, then Gazprom is treated in the same way of all those who are inside the EU. And so far, they are not privileged. I think we need to further be very vigilant from the European Commission side. They are the ones who have to see that it is all duly implemented also in Germany, and that there are no ways out and no backstages or back doors to avoid the requirements and provisions of the reformed gas directive. And so far, it's already relatively unattractive for Gazprom to pursue it, but so be it. So very expensive for Russia. Also now to complete the last kilometers, a bit more than 100 kilometers, I think, with their own assets. Frankly speaking, I'm not so happy about this very brutal way that the Americans handle it, because I think our way to achieve the same goal is more elegant, to do it through the gas directive, to make it less attractive at least, and then to threaten these 3 senators to the port authority of Sassnitz in Rügen. This is not the way I would like to handle such things. As I said, on the project itself, I'm very critical, but I think some Americans are overdoing it. Although the government, and it is a bipartisan thing in the US, there is this broad majority to hinder it. Politically, I can accept that, but the ways and means they are doing it is a bit nasty, and not the way that among friends one should handle such things.
That's a great, sir. Very good, very good. Thank you very much, sir. I already thanks for you participate the our nice discussion, and hope I will be. Let's try to again request to you please participate the our next session as well. So thank you very much for your participation, and we hope you will be
Can
helped.
you see? Yeah, thank you. Can you see how many people listened? Have you seen that? How many participants there were, or was it only us 2?
Right now we are just 2.
Aha.
So maybe we'll be see when this interview will be published. So maybe everybody can be see, because we already shared this link. We already shared this link to many groups. So that's why all participants will be see this.
So it's getting around.
So sir, thank you very much for your great support, especially Ukraine, especially Georgia, and ultimately we are also best hope for the Belarus as well.
Good. Slava Ukraini and Živie Belarus.
Thank you very much, sir. Slava Ukraini, sir. Thank you.